How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we are going to dive in deep, and I say deep, I mean deep, with the Jesse Mack Butler case. There's two lawsuits going on at once. There seems to be a federal lawsuit, and then there is the Marcy law violation lawsuit. And I'm a little late to the ball game on this show because this happened maybe a couple of days ago, but there's a lot going on here that I had to kind of research, put together, talk to Russ, and kind of figure out where we feel we can add input, because we're not lawyers, but I think that just being a concerned public, we kind of know what questions that need to be answered. That's the key of this dialogue. So I just want to mention something clearly before we get into the details. I want to be clear about what this is. What we're discussing today is a federal civil rights lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court. This is not a criminal case, and it's not a retrial of the criminal charges. A civil complaint contains allegations that have not yet been tested in court. The lawsuit centers on Title IX, a federal law that requires schools receiving federal funding to protect students from sex abuse, harassment, and abuse itself, and to respond appropriately when they're made aware of it. It also raises constitutional protections, including equal protection, meaning a school cannot knowingly allow one student to be harmed or retaliated against while protecting another. And we're very familiar with that in the prison world because we have what they call the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and it kind of has the same guideline. Not to equate both worlds, but we have a duty as well in the prison setting to protect those who are being sexually harassed or abused, and also protect them from being retaliated against if they make the complaint. There's also a separate Marcy law issue we'll briefly touch on. I have a video on that too as well. I reached out to the lawyer for that, see if she'll get back to me. I'd love to have her on. That involves victims' rights in the criminal case, specifically whether victims were properly consulted before the plea deal. That process is separate from this federal lawsuit, even though both stem from the same event. Everything we're about to discuss comes directly from publicly filed court documents. So we'll stick with what's alleged, explain the legal framework as best we can, and avoid speculation. So, Russ, two cases going on. We'll briefly do the Marcy one later on, but this is more about the federal complaint, and it's about the violation of Title IX and also constitutional protection. And this is coming from the family of one of the victims, LS, and it's going to be pretty much detailed in specific why they're making the complaint. So it's very interesting. And then what I thought I could do is just read there's big sections of it, and then toss the question your way, and we'll kind of complement the narrative with what I feel is excellent insight from you, if that works for you.
Absolutely.
All right, so Russ, why I set things up, you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I began my career back in the 80s, 1989 specifically, at San Quentin State Prison. I'm also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local county jail where I'm a case manager, and for a local probation department. I'm also the author of a book that I'm very proud of called Killing Complacency, Tactical Awareness for Corrections Professionals. And I'm also often found here on Tear Tack, opining on whatever the hot topic is.
What's Tear Tack?
Did I say tack?
Yeah, you said tack. You think it's tack?
It's awful early in the morning here. You've been up for hours. I've been up for minutes.
No, I get it. I think Russ, when he talks about complacency, tactical comes into mind.
It could a lot.
Yeah, I'll give you I think it's a valid excuse. Now, guys, if you're not familiar with the Jesse Mack Butler case, I definitely recommend you check our playlist on it. I have a few videos on it, or follow Justin in the Nick of Crime, or Justin the Nick of Crime. It's a very good channel. He's been really digging deep. A lot of the information I get is from his channel. But with that said, please check out the playlist, because we're going to try to just keep things moving forward here. So if you don't know this case, check out the playlist, catch yourself up, and then this will make sense as we move forward. So let's do when I titled this "When the Adults Fail," the Jesse Mack Butler case and the federal lawsuit that exposes everything. So this is our investigation here. I guess we're kind of becoming this Tear Talk Investigates thing. So this lawsuit is definitely something that can't be ignored. So we're going to focus on the federal complaint. So on December 22nd, 2025, a 20-page federal civil rights complaint landed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma. Filed under penalty of perjury, it tells a story that most people in Stillwater, Oklahoma already knew in fragments, whispered in hallways, and shared in outrage on social media, debated at kitchen tables across the college town. But this document is different. This isn't speculation. This isn't rumor. This is a sworn legal record that names names, cites dates, and lays out in excruciating methodical detail, that word, exactly how a teenage girl reported being raped and strangled and how nearly every adult with the power to protect her chose not to. The plaintiff is a girl identified in court documents only as LS. She is deaf and hard of hearing. She had an individualized education plan to help her succeed in school. She was a cheerleader. She trusted the adults around her. And according to this lawsuit, they failed her in ways that are almost incomprehensible. So this is her story. This is their story. And this is what happens when institutions protect themselves instead of the children in their care. So let's talk about the first part, is the dating relationship that became a nightmare. I'm going to stop sporadically to toss a question towards Russ. Russ is not aware of what these questions are, so be advised. We're both learning in the process, but it's good to have this show because this is meant to really bring about awareness, and then the comments is what strengthens the show because that's where we learn from each other. So if you're in the legal field, whatever it is, if there's something you feel could be covered more, let us know, or could be corrected. That's fair too. So between January and March of 2024, warning signs no one heeded. LS and Jesse Mack Butler dated for about 6 weeks in early 2024. She was 16. He was 16, turning 17. They were students at Stillwater High School in Stillwater, Oklahoma, a town of about 50,000 people, home to Oklahoma State University, where college football is religion and everyone knows everyone. Jesse's father, Mack Butler, worked for the school district as the assistant athletic director for Stillwater Public Schools. His mother, Jesse Butler, was well known in the community. The Butlers were connected, respected, part of the fabric of this town. But according to the federal lawsuit, Jesse Butler exhibited what the complaint calls a demonstrable pattern of disturbing, violent, aggressive behavior. When he got angry or frustrated, teammates would watch him slam his head repeatedly against the wall of the baseball clubhouse. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. His parents knew. According to the lawsuit, Mack and Jesse Butler were aware of Butler's disturbing behavior and did not seek help for their son or take any other corrective action. The relationship between LS and Jesse lasted 6 weeks. What happened during and after those 6 weeks would change her life forever. February 2024, the violence begins. Beginning in February of 2024, according to the lawsuit, Jesse Butler committed multiple sexual assaults against LS. On at least one occasion, he sexually assaulted her at his family's home. The complaint described what happened next in stark, horrifying detail. Jesse Butler, Jesse's mother, heard LS crying while Jesse was assaulting her. She knocked on the door of the room they were in. She knocked on the door in the room they were in. Jesse, through a closed door, told his mother that everything was fine. Jesse Butler walked away. Jesse continued assaulting LS. On another occasion, in a Walmart parking lot, Jesse Butler forced himself onto LS, put his hands around her throat, and strangled her. A doctor would later tell LS that she nearly died when Butler strangled her. The damage to her throat was so severe that she would eventually require surgery to repair it. That surgery wouldn't happen until July of 2025, more than a year later. And by the way, she still bears the physical scar. I'll show you a video later that's actually going to show you that scar. The relationship ended in March of 2024, but for LS, the nightmare was just beginning. Okay, now, Russ, when you look at cases involving violent sexual assault by juveniles, and you worked in a juvenile facility, especially crimes this severe, where should the line be between rehabilitation and incarceration? Should certain crimes automatically disqualify someone from youthful offender status, or should it always depend on individual circumstances? And guys, this is why I'm telling you, you need to watch the other videos if you're not familiar with this case, because we're diving right in. Okay, Russ.
So, you know, when we talk about offenders, especially youthful offenders, kind of the overarching theme as it's become over the past years is this constant push for nothing but, you know, or almost exclusively rehabilitation. And what's happened is we've shifted away from justice towards rehabilitation. And people often, you know, conflate the two. and not understanding, these are different prongs of the same system, and they should all be addressed. They should all be given, their due worth. But what happened, especially in this case, is they just went ahead and they were able to get him that youthful offender status, which allowed him, basically just, it's going to be, I think it was like less than 2 years. He immediately, as soon as I think he turns 18 is the way it worked. Then, he's off. He's
19, 19, Russ.
Is it 19? Okay. That's why I was momentarily there, because I've done so much with California law, and not as much here, but the point remains the same, is there was, almost no penalty. And people want to say, oh, we don't want to be punitive. We want to, be rehabilitative. And that completely ignores the victim. That completely ignores the safety of the public. And it puts more people in jeopardy. And it makes sure that justice is absolutely not done.
Yeah, and I love what you said, if you don't mind revisiting that rehabilitation, safety and security, or I like to consider safety and security accountability, to be honest with you. So many things involved with safety and security when it comes to accountability, deterrence, a respect to the victims and their safety right off the bat. It also helps people stay motivated to report crimes of this nature where they feel they could be retaliated against, because part of accountability becomes the protection against retaliation, coercion, threats. But Rush, I love what you said, because it is a partnered system, rehabilitation and safety and security. But I always feel that it's treated, especially in politics, as if they're isolated when they're not, because when they're locked behind the wall, what do you do in a majority of the day?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. It's really incumbent, upon corrections itself, to make sure that we keep the wolves separated from the sheep. But corrections is not the only partner in all of what happens in society and community. And so while we are sitting here currently discussing the crime that got us to this point, this is really much more about the second victimization of the victims, because what happened at that point didn't happen at the hands of a wild, crazed, violent individual. This happened at the hands of
the system,
an entity that was supposed to protect these people, and it failed on multiple levels. But it wasn't just a failure of failing to do things. They actually contributed to the re-victimization of these individuals, almost as if they were Jesse Mack themselves. And even though it didn't go into an actual criminal act, what they did was so violative of Title IX in federal law that they're about to have their ass handed to them, in my opinion, because this federal Justice Department, at the hands of Harmeet Dillon, is basically not taking any prisoners. They have been on an absolute crusade for victims of all kinds over the last few months. And I think that you're about to see this school really get its comeuppance.
Yeah, and guys, remember, Jesse Mack Butler was showing signs of a matured or a maturing sexual predator. People that understand this type of individual, like me and Russ Wood, we work around them. I mean, this is someone that is matured in those ways, a lot past just a simple juvenile. And I think people should be recognizing that. And to be honest with you, this was never about Jesse Mack Butler, but what's best, not even just for the victims, but for the future victims. And I think there is a failure on so many levels to think ahead like that. So let's just go back. So the report that changed everything. So September 11, 2024, a youth worker forces a reckoning. 6 months after the relationship ended, this is between LS and Jesse Mack. On September 11, 2024, LS learned something that made her blood run cold. She wasn't Jesse Butler's only victim. There was another girl, another student, another survivor. The two girls met at a church to talk. They needed to process what had happened to them, to know they weren't alone, to figure out what to do. While they were talking, a youth worker overheard them discussing Butler's abuse. The youth worker gave them an ultimatum. Unless they reported Butler to authorities within 24 hours, the youth worker would be forced to make the report themselves. LS was 16 years old, deaf and hard of hearing, carrying the trauma of rape and strangulation, and now she had 24 hours to decide whether to tell adults in positions of power what Jesse Butler had done to her. She made the decision to come forward. So I'm not mad at the youth worker for that, by the way. That's maybe her approach could have been a little bit more sensitive, but either way, the key was we're going to get this reported. So I'm okay with the youth worker. September 12, 2024, the day LS reported. The next day, September 12, 2024, LS went to Assistant Principal Tommy Grant at Stillwater High School. She told him that Jesse Butler had sexually assaulted her, that he had strangled her, that he had harassed her, stalked her, and abused her. Grant called the school resource officer, Paul Blankenship, to his office. SRO Blankenship interviewed LS. And then, according to the lawsuit, he said something that would set the tone for everything that followed. SRO Blankenship told LS that she would have to get her story straight with Butler's other victim. He told her she would have to go to the Sayville Center for Child Advocacy to make sure she was telling the truth. Now, I want you to read that again. All right, so hold on. SCO Blankenship told LS that she would have to get her story straight with Butler's other victims. He told her she would have to go to the Sayville Center for Child Advocacy to make sure she was telling the truth. Okay, so read that again. A 16-year-old girl, deaf and hard of hearing, gathers the courage to report being raped and strangled by a classmate, and the school's police officer, the person whose job is to protect students, tells her she needs to get her story straight and prove she's telling the truth. From that moment forward, according to the federal complaint, the school district did not perform an investigation into Butler's conduct. The school district took no action to protect LS from Butler, and the school district did not notify staff and employees about LS's report. LS had done exactly what we tell victims to do. She reported, she told a trusted adult, and she asked for help. And the institution that was supposed to protect her did nothing. So, Russ, the second question, and it's real crazy. I see more compassion for inmates who misuse the system when it comes to sexual assault. Not all inmates misuse, let me be fair, but it is misused a lot to gain some level of power or authority over staff. But I see more compassion in how an inmate is handled in these situations than I am for a young high school student. So think about this from the institutional perspective, Russ. A 16-year-old girl reports being raped and then has to sit in math class with her rapist for 2 weeks while adults who knew did nothing. A court issues a protective order and it never gets logged in. In your experience, Russ, detailing with institutional systems, how does something like this happen? Is it incompetence, indifference, or something more deliberate? And what should the consequences be?
So first off, if I address what the resource officer did, completely wrong. First of all, him even saying something like that to that girl after she's already had this conversation with the other victim is the kind of thing that could create problems, in a court proceeding. And in this case, it's almost like he was fumbling the ball on purpose. That's not what you do when you are approached by someone who is, claiming that they are a victim of something. You do want to do things that are supportive. You also want to do things that are documentative in the sense that, hey, this is the initial contact. So what we have to do is we have to take at least some of this information, regardless of what's going to happen down the line when it gets looked at by a detective or a social worker that's been asked to, step in. But these are the things where this individual should have been trying to protect the integrity of the investigation, protect the integrity of the evidence, and not tell people, oh, you need to get your story straight. I mean, what is that? That is no part of the process whatsoever. That's for either other people to handle.
Yeah.
But, he does have a responsibility to take some initial action with regards to preserving the evidence. And so the preservation of the evidence at that point right there is a statement. He doesn't have to go into deep detail. This is the kind of thing where he gets someone else involved, but telling someone to get their story straight, that looks like he's already obstructing justice, in my opinion. So, and that's where it begins. This gets much worse throughout this process, as you're going to see as we go on. And so what that individual is thinking, I don't know, but it's certainly nothing professional. And they certainly act as if, oh, this is brand new. I've never done this before. These are the things that they're supposed to know automatically. They're supposed to know what their resources are. They're supposed to know how the arc of this case is going to go. They're supposed to know what they're supposed to do with regards to, making contact with a sexual abuse victim, and to be able to, go out there and start activating those things, And that's one of the reasons that this school resource officer should have been, immediately trying to get the resources that he has at his fingertips to help the victim and to preserve the evidence and to further the investigation. None of those things happened.
Yeah. So what I would expect, and just in my years working in law enforcement, is once I get the complaint, my job, I would say, is the SRO, and I could be wrong, but my job, I would think, because most of them should have law enforcement backgrounds. My job is automatically the protection of the victim or the victim. So even if she mentioned somebody else, I would want that person with me. So I don't know if she mentioned both parties at that time, but either way, then you provide me the complaint. I'm not going to tell you to get your story. I'm not going to do any of that. Like Russ said, my job now is number one priority is to keep her separate from the person she's making the allegation against and guide her to where she needs the help. Not pretty much force her to go find it herself. My job would be to sit with her and say, okay, so this is where we're at. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell her step by step. I'm going to do this. In the meantime, I think we're going to have to call Jesse Mack Butler's parents as well and get something going on that end, because he could still be a threat to other students. So with that said, I'm not just protecting her. I'm also got to do what I can to protect the other students in that school. So where was the effort at that point to pull Jesse Mack out of class, to call his parents, call local authorities, and make sure at all times you are protecting the victim who had the courage to step up and say this. And the scary thing, as I said, to leave that all on the victim and say, you got to go figure this out. You got to go here. You got to get is not what someone in my opinion, it's not what someone in a law enforcement role that I'm aware of would do. As I said, in a prison setting, we do a lot more than that simple. Like if someone came up to me and said they were raped, I wouldn't sit, okay, well, you got to get your story straight. No, that's not for me to make that decision. My job is to document the concern, immediately separate the victim from the aggressor, and help the person who's the victim, guide them through the process to take the next steps for protection and then obviously hopefully accountability. But this is, I think, the biggest failure that I saw across this whole document. I mean, obviously the rest of it is failure, but it's reactionary failure. This is foundational.
Can I revisit a little bit of this real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this guy, just so everyone knows, he's an actual Stillwater police officer, right? So
Paul Blankenship.
Yes. So, and here's what, based on what she told him, he had the actual power to make an instant arrest right there, right? He can investigate things, right? He doesn't have to wait for a detective or anything like that. Usually in with police and sheriffs and things like that, there is kind of like a little bit of a hierarchy. They like to get, some of the specialized people with special training involved, but he certainly has the power to grab the ball and run with it until he can hand it off, right? He's also a mandatory reporter of child abuse. So let's not forget that. It appears that he failed with that aspect of it. He also has what we call an affirmative duty to act on a criminal complaint. This is what he did, though. He pulled the victim from class for a private meeting, completely against policy, right? Then told her that he would do nothing unless Butler spoke to her again. So he's just basically telling her that, hey, she is at the whim of the system, right? He took no action on the criminal sexual assault report. He was friends with the Butler family. If that was going to be an issue from him, he should have recused himself from the case and immediately got someone else out there to do this, right? But in the meantime, he can still handle things. That's legal, that's lawful, that's normal, that's ordinary, that's part of your duty. But sometimes you do have to pull yourself back from certain cases, right? When the victim's parents complained, his supervisor, Billy Cluck, said Blankenship's friendships with a Butler should not be held against him. What does that even mean? It's not that you're holding it against somebody. It's that you should be doing the bare minimum to ensure a fair process. And that's part of what due process is for the victim and even for the accused. But that was, completely out the window. And essentially, you had the police department defending a conflict of interest and doing nothing about it. So then that goes from an appearance of a conflict to an actual conflict.
Yeah. And what's good about what you're saying, Russ, I agree. And this, I think, is one of the first concerns of the violation of the constitutional right to protect the individual, the school, because the thing here is once the concern has been dropped, regardless of if it's valid or not, you have to protect the person making the allegation. That's just law enforcement 101, because you have to assume anybody making the allegation like this could be retaliated against. So your number one priority is really not to discern the validity at this point, but to ensure you're protecting the individual while the process pans out. And that was right off the bat a failure to do so, because even if she told a story that, as he said, you got to get it straight, figure that out later. Your number one objective is not to send her back to class. Your number one objective is to protect her. If she names someone else, protect that person. And one of the ultimate things, like Russ said, is in the meantime, we got to get Jesse Mack handled too. He can't be in the school because it's not just about LS. It's also about the potential that he could do it again. So now, September 13, 2024, the harassment campaign begins. The day after LS reported Jesse Butler, he began what the lawsuit describes as a coordinated campaign of harassment against LS. He called her. He had other students call her on his behalf. The message was clear: don't talk to the police about him. Meanwhile, LS was still going to classes, still seeing Jesse Butler in the hallway, still sitting in the same math class as the boy who had raped and strangled her. This is insane. For 2 weeks, she endured this every single day, walking into that classroom, seeing him there, knowing the adults knew and had done nothing to separate them. Teachers had no idea. They hadn't been told. They didn't know they had a sexual assault victim and her attacker sitting in the same room, in the same class every single day. And I said, one of the things in corrections, once you get the allegation, primary, separate. So September 20, 2024, the football game. On Friday, September 20, 2024, LS was cheerleading at a Stillwater High School football game. Was part of her job as a cheerleader. She had to be there. Jesse Butler was in the stands. He took pictures of her. Then he came down onto the track where he wasn't authorized to be, to get closer to her, to harass her, to intimidate her. He was visible, obvious, clearly somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. According to the lawsuit, despite Butler being visible and obviously where he was not supposed to be, no one from the defendant school district removed Butler from the track. And his parents, Mack and Jacques Butler, were aware that Jesse was stalking, harassing, and intimidating LS. They just took no action. Then on September 26, 2024, the protective order that was never enforced. So 2 weeks after LS reported the assaults, her mother, Amber Selvey, filed for an emergency protective order against Jesse Butler on behalf of her daughter. On September 26, 2024, that emergency protective order was served on Jesse Butler while he was at school. What happened next reveals everything you need to know about where the school's priorities lay. According to the lawsuit, after Jesse was served with the EPO, that's the Executive Protective Order, Principal Walter Howell called Amber Selvey. He told her that Mack Butler, Jesse's father, the school assistant athletic director, was crying and taking it really hard when the EPO was served on Jesse at school. All about vanity. Think about that. A protective order meant to help a sexual assault victim help them be more safe from her attacker is served, and the principal calls the victim's mother to tell her how upset the attacker's father is about it. But Principal Howell wasn't done. During that same phone call, he made a request that should shock anyone who cares about student safety. He asked Amber Selby to report any problems with Jesse directly to him instead of the Stillwater Police Department. A school principal, not law enforcement officer, not a criminal investigator, not someone with arrest powers, asked the victim's mother to bypass police and come to him instead when her daughter had problems with the boy who had raped and strangled her. The lawsuit characterizes this as an intent to keep the matter in-house rather than involving authorities and potentially obstruction or failure to report under Oklahoma's mandatory reporting law. And then the school did something even more telling. In response to Jesse Butler being served with a protective order on campus, Stillwater Public School instituted a brand new policy. Emergency protective orders would no longer be allowed to be served on students while they were on school grounds. They didn't fix the problem. They made it harder for victims to get protection. Now, here's where the institutional failure becomes deliberate. Stillwater Public School had a policy, their own policy, in black and white, that required all emergency protective orders to be entered into an electronic database. The purpose was simple and critical, so that all teachers and staff would know about the EPO, and they could help protect the student and could help enforce the order. It's a basic safety measure. It's common sense. It's their own rules. We have it within our system as well. We have keep separates that are put into the system that allow all staff or make them aware that these two inmates can't be around each other. So it's very, very similar. According to the federal lawsuit, LS's emergency protective order against Jesse Butler was never entered into the database. Teachers didn't know it existed. Staff didn't know it existed. Security didn't know it existed. The court order meant to keep LS safe became worthless because the school chose not to log it in. And according to the complaint, through that fall, okay, so hold on. And according to the complaint, throughout that fall, that's the season, throughout that fall, on multiple occasions, Butler stalked and harassed LS at school and at school-sponsored activities. Jesse's father, Mack Butler, also harassed LS on campus multiple times. The lawsuit specifically describes how he would stand outside the chair barn and glare at LS when she went there for games. A student is being stalked by her rapist. The rapist's father, who works for the school, is also harassing her. A court order exists to protect her, and the school has deliberately chosen not to enforce it. So, Russ, from your experience, this is even in corrections because we deal with the same type of management. When you're supervising someone on a serious case like this and they miss an early obligation, even without explanation, how do you – wait, no, hold on. Is that the right question? Hold on, wait a second. No, this question doesn't belong here. Hey, Russ, but let's just go. I mean, there's a lot to explore here, but the executive order, the failure to place it, the fact that he called Selby, the mother of the victim, and said, "Hey, any concerns, report it to me." I mean, there's a lot of violations there, correct? You're muted, Russ.
Sorry about that. So the main thing here to me is this. They knew, I mean, they called her and talked to her about how upset, this coach was that his son was getting the protective order, if I heard that right. But regardless, the main thing here is that the school knew about it. As an entity, the school knew about it. And what did they do? Well, they claimed that, we forgot to enter that into the system. It's absolute bullshit. That's an absolute lie. They did what they did on purpose. I'm not afraid to say that out loud because it's obvious that that is exactly what happened. The way that they treated it up to this point, the fact that it wasn't entered in the system is not a surprise. It doesn't meet the surprise threshold at all. It's not some oversight. This is deliberately violating the civil rights of the victims. And that's what it is, pure and simple. And that is why this lawsuit is going to go the distance, whatever that distance is. There may be a settlement, but you can bet that there is going to be a consent decree that comes out of it. You can bet that there are going to be civil damages that come out of it. And you can bet that probably X number of people are going to lose their jobs over it, and rightly so.
Yeah, Russ, I found my question. Sorry about that. I plugged in. I said, when a 16-year-old student reports rape and strangulation to school officials, this is the moment institutions are supposed to act decisively. So again, from your experience with systems and authority, what should have happened immediately. We kind of discussed that already.
Yeah,
after this report in the first hours and days, and at what point inaction stop being this is good. And at one point does inaction stop being incompetence and become deliberate indifference and real consequences? Can I comment something here? Awareness. Once you're aware of something and you do nothing about it, that's where negligence sits in. I know being a person in a high position myself, if I'm aware of something, I can't be unaware of it. So my decisions at my level are going to be a lot different than, let's say, an officer's decision, because there's a lot more involved in my decision making at the higher level than there would be for an officer who may be more myopic, but needed still, but maybe more myopic in scope. So when you get to a principal's level, that's the highest level I would think the school has of accountability, at least without the oversight of a superintendent, right? So they're paid to make those grand scale decisions, and that includes all levels to protect the person who made that complaint. So if you have a principal at that level who, one, failed to put the stuff into the system, probably they didn't want to document it. They thought that they could probably somehow protect it. I don't know why the principal will even not want that stuff put into the system. It covers yourself liability wise. This is where negligence starts to get in, because now it's been clear that you've been made aware. So like if I was pushing this lawsuit, my big thing is, before we even talk about the inaction, I'm going to push awareness, especially going after the highest level of authority. Because at the end of the day, yeah, I would like for all the teachers and stuff, don't get me wrong, but I'm going after the highest level of authority because they're in the position to ensure that everybody is made aware. I could attack a teacher, but I'm going to go after the principal, because the principal was pulled directly into this. The SRO was pulled directly into it. These are different avenues of reporting. And sadly, all I see here is one, the executive the protection order not being put through, which is really, the protective order is what notifies everyone. That's the big key here too. The protective order, once put in the system, notifies everyone. So not only would you probably have a meeting on it in a way that protects the integrity of the concern, because there is an integrity of a sexual assault case. You have to protect the integrity of it, but protection will supersede that. So if I have to tell my need to know staff, teachers in schools, because we have to now, you have the protection order and you have the sexual accusation, right? So if I have the protective order in play, I'm going to do it respectfully, but that's going to supersede any integrity leak to some extent. I have to let my staff know, have to make them be aware. So if someone was to give me a lawsuit and say, hey, you told the teachers about what Jesse Mack Butler did, and as a father, Jesse Mack Butler, I'm upset that you violated the integrity of an investigation. No, you can't, because my priority now is to protect this victim. So what I have to do is put people in the know in an effort to protect, and that's going to be anybody in the school, especially because you have somebody here who's constantly violating it. So like even a janitor could see it happen, so you want to let the school staff at minimal know that there is a protective order here that we have to carry out as professionals. I mean, to be honest with you, I would think it would be easier at that point to send the child to another school, Jesse Mack Butler. You don't move the victim. The victim is not to be punished. The victim is not to be inconvenienced. You move Jesse Mack Butler. Maybe the homeschooling or another. Well, I wouldn't even put him in another school, because here's the other thing. When you have a powerful allegation like that, 2 sexual assaults, he shouldn't even be around other children his age. He should have been immediately brought to homeschooling until we could figure this out. And obviously that wasn't done. So he shouldn't even have been allowed still in the school, or go into another school shouldn't have been allowed, because you have
he should have been arrested and put into detention. Period.
Yeah, because you got to figure this is a high level violent accusation, and even if you're so the thing is, it's not just even about protecting the victim. You also have to protect the future occurrence. So you're right. You can't just. I just thought of it now. That's what I would do. If I have a concern, I can't put this person around other inmates, because there's a chance they could rape another inmate. So I have to take measures in place to ensure not just to protect them of the victims that already made the allegations, but future victims. Because here, let me tell you what we don't know if it happened or not. You never know. But, when someone goes forward, it does encourage a domino effect. Other people now feel safe as long as the actions coming to play show that the victim is a priority, that you're pushing for the safety of that victim. Now, granted, this case here, maybe you could have future victims here, or you could have other victims. We don't know that yet because the system didn't protect the original individuals who were reporting it. So the problem is, if you don't take the threat out of the environment, you're going to have future victims, and now you're going to be held liable because you were made aware that this person did this to these two victims. And you're more concerned about protecting the vanity of someone as opposed to the safety of the victim or future victims. Now we go to the system that protects predators. So December 9, 2024, the specialist who knew nothing. By early December 2024, nearly 3 months after LS reported being raped, she was struggling. Her grades were suffering. She was uncharacteristically struggling with her school assignments. Makes sense. On December 9, 2024, LS deaf, hard of hearing specialist called her mother, Amber, concerned about LS's academic difficulties. Amber explained what was happening. Her daughter had been sexually assaulted by Jesse Butler. There was an emergency protective order in place. LS was dealing with trauma while trying to function at school. The specialist had no idea what Amber was talking about. Now, this is the teacher that deals directly with Amber. This is the specialist because my daughter's assigned an IEP. Think about that. LS is a student with an individualized education plan. She has a specialist whose entire job is to support her educational needs. And that specialist, nearly 3 months after the report, had never been told that LS had been raped and was dealing with ongoing harassment from her attacker. Amber complained to assistant principal Tommy Grant about staff not being informed of the situation. Grant responded by emailing LS's teacher telling him to give grace on missing work because LS was having a rough go of it. He still didn't tell them why. He didn't mention Jesse Butler. He didn't mention the protective order. He didn't explain that they had sexual assault victims in their classroom who needed actual support, not just grace. And again, I think we just mentioned how they may try to utilize the guise of protecting the investigative. No, the protection comes first. The child should no longer even been at that school, Jesse Mack Butler. So Principal Howell's stunning admission. So this is now January 14th. 4 months after LS reported being raped, 4 months after an emergency protective order was issued, 4 months of LS being harassed, stalked, and intimidated while school officials did nothing, on January 14, 2025, Walter Howell finally called Amber Selvey to address her complaints about how the school was handling her daughter's situation. What he had said during that phone call should be the end of his career in education. According to the federal lawsuit, Principal Walter Howell told Amber Selvey that he had made a deliberate choice not to enter LS's emergency protective order into the school security database. His reason, he did not want to interfere with Butler's opportunity to receive an education at the defendant school's district. He chose to protect Jesse Butler's access to education over LS's physical safety. He didn't deny that the database existed. He didn't claim there was a technical error. He didn't say he forgot. He made a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice, and he chose to prioritize the educational opportunities of a rapist over the safety of his victim. Howell also told Amber that he was keeping LS safe by personally keeping Mack and Jesse Butler away from LS. Yeah, okay. In other words, rather than implementing systemic protections that would involve teacher, staff, and security, rather than following the school's own policies, he was personally handling it himself. A principal at a high school with hundreds of students was claiming he could personally monitor a teenage rapist and his father, who also worked for the district, to keep a victim safe instead of just entering a protective order into a database designed for exactly this purpose. Howell also promised that when the EPO was eventually dropped, the school would still keep Butler and LS out of the same classes, but until then, she was pretty much on her own. On January 26th, the school resource officer humiliates LS. January 22nd. On January 22nd, 2025, school resource officer Paul Blankenship pulled LS out of class for a private meeting. According to the lawsuit, this was against school policy, but was touched on before. At the meeting, Blankenship told LS that he was aware of Butler's habits of stalking her in the school parking lot. Then he told her something stunning. As long as Butler did not speak to her, SRO Blankenship would not do anything about Butler's conduct. Russ touched on that earlier. A police officer assigned to protect students tells a sexual assault victim that as long as her rapist just stalks her silently, he won't do anything about it. And then, according to the complaint, Blankenship deliberately pulled LS out of class and then escorted her back to embarrass her. This wasn't protection. This was retaliation. This was punishment for asking adults to do their job. And then on January 28, 2025, 3 men send a message. On January 28, 2025, there was a school wrestling match. Tyler and Amber Selvey attended as part of their responsibilities. LS had to be there for cheer. Also in attendance, Mack Butler, Walter Howell, and SRO Paul Blankenship, all there as part of their job duties. According to the lawsuit, the 3 men sat together, and throughout the match, they glared at and intimidated LS. Think about what this means. The principal who refused to log the protective order, the father of the rapist who also happens to work for the school district, the school police officer who told LS he wouldn't do anything about Butler stalking her, all 3 sitting together staring down a 16-year-old girl at a school event. That's not coincidence. That's a message. And then on January 29, 2025, the safety meeting that wasn't safe. The next day, January 29, 2025, Stillwater Public School held what they called the safety plan meeting for LS. It was supposed to be a locked door meeting, confidential, with only the people on LS safety team present. Where did they hold this confidential safety meeting? In Principal Walter Howell's office. And according to the lawsuit, Howell came into the room and positioned himself where he could overhear the discussion. Then he left the door open, the door that was adjacent to the front office, so that anyone in the front office could overhear the supposedly confidential meeting. The school's own policies were being violated to ensure LS had no privacy, no confidentiality, no safe place to discuss her safety needs. And what did this big important safety meeting accomplish? 2 things. They moved Jesse Butler's parking spot to the other side of the parking lot, and they allowed LS to leave third period early to attend cheer. That's it. That's the sum total of the safety plan. Move his parking spot and let her leave 1 class early. Teachers and staff still weren't informed of LS safety plan. They still didn't know there was a protective order, and they still didn't know what was happening. And SRO Blankenship, he was required to attend LS safety meeting as part of his duties as a school resource officer. He never showed up. And then on January 30th, 2025, he friends with the Butlers. The next day, January 30th, 2025, LS's parents, Tyler and Amber Selvey, went to the Stillwater Police Department to file a complaint about SRO Paul Blankenship's conduct. They met with his supervisor, Lieutenant Cluck. I think that's it, C-L-U-C-K. They explained everything, how Blankenship had told LS to get her story straight, how he said he wouldn't do anything about Butler stalking her as long as Butler didn't speak to her, how he humiliated her by pulling her out of class, how he sat with Mack Butler and Principal Howell glaring at their daughter at a school event. Lieutenant Cluck listened to their complaints. And then, according to the federal lawsuit, he told them SRO Blankenship is friends with the Butlers, so they should not hold SRO Blankenship conduct against him. That's it. That's the explanation. That's the excuse. He's friends with the family of the rapist, so you shouldn't be upset that he's not protecting your daughter. According to the complaint, nothing was done regarding SRO Blankenship's conduct after that meeting. He faced no consequences. He received no reprimand. Nothing changed. So, Russ, when students see something they believe is fundamentally unjust and want to protect the school administrators, respond and want to protect. Sorry. These questions are a little off here. I must have moved them up a little bit. So, hey, Russ, there's a lot of thoughts here. They also went directly to the police, like you said, because ultimately SRO is a law enforcement officer that even though he works at the school, his ability to practice law enforcement abilities or whatever it is under oversight from Stillwater Police Department. But Russ, there's a lot there. I'm going to get the question. I got to find it. But what's your thoughts?
Oh, well, so there's a lot to cover there, right? But what I would say is this. Okay, so first of all, I know that we're still, talking about the crimes and the process here, and only have just touched on what's going on with regards to this Title IX thing.
No, we'll get to that, Russ. We'll get to that.
Okay. But what I was gonna point out that all of these individuals in this case, right, could and should probably based on what we know, based on what's been reported now, face some really rather harsh sentences. When you look at obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact, I mean, just think about this. So you've got this principal, Walter Howell, probably a strong case for this. Told the victim's mom to report problems to him and not the police. That's obstruction, pure and simple. He knew about the felony sexual assault, certainly by September 12th. He actively were diverting things around law enforcement. He harassed and intimidated the victim. And then it appears that certainly if you look at like Oklahoma statutes, that he was obstructing an officer and interfering with the investigation. That doesn't mean that the officer wasn't involved too. You look at the guy, Paul Blankenship, the SRO, he took the report. He deliberately failed to investigate a known felony. As a cop, he's a mandated reporter, so he's not even allowed not to report it. He told the victim that he would do nothing. That's active suppression. So you can look at that as obstruction. Maybe you could look at that as accessory after the fact if the point of it was to avoid prosecution. His supervisor defended his conduct, and so he could get obstruction, official misconduct, and failure to report. All of those things are, not just administrative. Those are criminal acts. You've got his lieutenant supervisor. He was informed. He defended Blankenship's friendship with the Butlers. He was allowed to compromise the investigation. Since he knew about that, he had a responsibility to recuse the guy in his stead, by proxy, and put someone else in there. Didn't do that. And then Mack Butler, the kid's dad, witness tampering. He used his school position to intimidate. They didn't do anything about that either. And so that goes back to even more official misconduct and criminal actions.
Could Paul Blankenship could also have recused himself if it was noted that he is a friend.
But he should have. But that doesn't even matter because it was obviously known to the lieutenant because he talked to the victims about it.
Yeah.
So.
Because now look, Russ, you made a very good point there. Because now, if the victim, right, you said victim reported to the SRO, who's now friends with the Butler family, you have a violation of the integrity of confidentiality.
Absolutely, and so the list just keeps getting longer, and they keep making it worse. How do you make something this bad worse? You're complicit in it, and that is the only answer.
And Russ, it's really spot on because even if Paul Blankenship didn't, let's say if he didn't violate the integrity of confidence, you would assume he could have because of his relationship with them. That's why you recuse yourself. I don't want people to think I did because I am close to them, so it's best for me to recuse myself.
Yes, but even before that, he still had a responsibility to report it.
No, of course.
And so,
and then recuse himself after that.
People don't know he's not some guy that was conflicted and had a potential duty. No, he had an affirmative duty, and he failed.
Yeah, and I got the question was when students see something they believe is fundamentally unjust and want to. No, sorry, it's the same right here. Looking at this pattern, information withheld from staff, a protective order deliberately not logged, a principal claiming personal control instead of systemic safeguards, a school resource officer minimizing stalking, and supervisors excusing conflicts of interest. And that's Lieutenant Clark. At what point does an institution stop failing a victim and start actively protecting the person causing harm? And how do power relationships and fear of consequences shape those decisions? That was the question.
And that is going to be, or all part of this is going to be why they are going to lose this federal case, and they're not even in a position to defend themselves. Can you imagine if they're stupid enough to take this in front of a jury and trying to get up there and say, well, I was just trying to do what was best for him and his future education? Are they going to say that in front of an open court and then be hit with the fact, hey, you're a mandatory reporter. You just admitted to a crime. What are they going to do? Get up there and lie about the fact? Oh, I did report it, and then they're going to be guilty of perjury. There's no way to defend this.
And Russ, even I know like these lawsuits, they throw everything out there in the hopes that something will stick. So even though if a lot of this stuff comes down to hearsay, hypothetically, which I doubt, but let's say that's the case, you still got the failure to log in the EPO.
Yeah.
That's all you need, really.
And what is that? What is that actually? Is that obstruction? Is that accessory after the fact? Is that part of failing to be a mandated reporter? I mean, if you have a responsibility to file a piece of paper that's part of a protective order against a juvenile victim, what are you actually doing there? Is that the crime that you're committing? You're failing to report it by entering it into the system. I think a case could be made for that actually in this case, because it was so blatant, and they actually have a statement from him giving the reasons why he failed to enter it. Why aren't they going after these people?
Right. And if you make that the anchor of your argument, not as a condition, but the anchor of the argument, it makes everything else that's filtered through that as reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, I would actually use that as the anchor. Hey, listen, no matter what happens, we all can see right now that there was no effort to put in a protective order. So now that that's out there and we can prove that, now let's do the other things that's going to make this argument a little bit more beneficial towards the victim, because I think the anchor is the failure to put the EPO in. So now they do I want to talk about the safety meeting, doing it out in the open. That should have been private. The discussions definitely are meant for the safety of the victim. They should have decided at that point. I mean, it's crazy how shifting. If you think the person, here's how I think this went wrong, in my opinion. This isn't, and not to minimize, but hear me out. This isn't just about the safety of LS now. It's about the safety of future victims. If you're thinking that there's a concern and you want to limit that concern to between just Jesse Mack Butler and the victim, then the effort you're making is really very small in scope. It doesn't really take on what me and Russ would do, is the universal precautions of what could be something greater at scale. So the end result of just switching parking lots or whatever it is a joke, because even if you think that's enough, which it's not, but even if you thought that was enough to protect LS, what about other victims? You know, I think the problem is here, whatever happened between whatever this relationship is between the school and the Butlers, whatever it is, they looked at Jesse Mack Butler and they pretty much narrowed the concern to between him and LS. And this is not a simple concern. It's the potential for an aggressive rapist, an aggressive predator. Your job as a principal goes beyond just protecting one victim, which you didn't do, but protecting the school itself. And to know that a safety meeting, because they're going to have another one, I'll give you the results of that, only led to switching the parking lot. What about your protection for the school? And that didn't even matter for the protection of the victim, but just as an added thought. So now, in February, we get a second safety meeting. After about a week after LS safety meeting, the school held a safety meeting for Jesse Butler now. So the safety meeting number 2 is for Butler. Why? According to the lawsuit, the school held this meeting because it believed that Title IX required them to treat Butler equally to LS. Think about the logic. Title IX is designed to prevent sex discrimination and protect victims of sexual violence. Stillwater Public Schools interpreted to mean they had to provide equal support to a rapist and his victim. And who did they designate as Jesse Butler's safe people? The adults he could go to for support and protection: Mack Butler, his father, the man who worked for the district and had been harassing LS, Walter Howell, the principal who deliberately chose not to log the protective order, Paul Blankenship, the school resource officer who told LS he wouldn't do anything about Butler stalking her. These were Butler's protectors. These were the people who the school trusted to keep him safe and support him. The same 3 men who had sat together glaring at LS at the wrestling match less than 2 weeks earlier. So February 5th, 2025, Butler violates the protective order and no one does anything. On February 2025, Stillwater High School held senior signing day, a school-sponsored event on the basketball court where student athletes signed their commitments to colleges. SRO Blankenship was in attendance. Multiple members of school administration and staff were present. LS was there for cheer. Jesse Butler was there as well. And according to the federal complaint, In full view of staff and administrators, Butler came within 5 feet of LS to stare at, harass, and intimidate her. This was a direct, blatant violation of the emergency protective order. I keep on saying executive, it's emergency protective order. He wasn't supposed to be near her at all, and he did it in front of teachers, administrators, and police officers. How many school employees intervened on LS's behalf? Zero. None. Nada. Not one adult with the authority to enforce the protective order did anything. It wasn't until one of LS cheer teammates told the cheer coach that what was happening that anyone acted. And what did they do? They removed LS from the court, not Butler. They removed LS. The victim was removed. The rapist who had just violated a court order stayed. After this incident, the school's response was to tell LS that if she wanted to attend a school activity in the future, she should let them know ahead of time so they can make sure Butler wouldn't be allowed to attend. In other words, if you want to participate in school activities, you have to give us advance notice so we can manage your rapist's schedule. Otherwise, you're on your own. Then on February 10, 2025, this was the advocating for no consequence. 5 days after Butler violated the protective order in front of staff and administrators, the school held a second safety meeting for him. According to the lawsuit, at this meeting, Mack Butler, Walter Howard, SRO Blankenship advocated for Butler not to have any consequences from the school for violating the EPO. A father, principal, and a police officer argued that a rapist should face no consequences for violating a court order designed to protect his victim. And after this meeting, the school asked LS not to attend any baseball games or related events because it would interfere with his ability to participate in the baseball team, yet she's a cheerleader. Where's her rights? Think about what this means in practice. Jesse Butler plays baseball. His father, Mack Butler, is a school employee heavily involved in athletics. LS was generally discouraged from participating in attending school activities so that she would not interfere with Mack and Jesse Butler's ability to attend activities. A rape victim was being pushed out of school activities so her rapist and her father could participate without inconvenience. So my next question for you, Russ, is
can I bring something into this right now?
Yeah, and I'll give you the question afterwards.
Okay, so this part of it specifically with regards to the things that they asked her to do or told her to do or whatever you want to put on it, people might think, well, they could just do that. No, they couldn't. There's this other thing, because right up to this point, we've been talking about nothing but Title IX. Title II, that would involve her specifically because she has a hearing disability. They are not supposed to do any of the stuff that you just mentioned. More violations of the law. And, these people are supposed to be trained. They're supposed to know what all of these different titles are, and yet they did it anyway. And so this, because of her vulnerability as a victim, is probably going to shoot the monetary award even higher, in my opinion.
Well, no, the question touches on that, Russ. So when a school interprets, it's great. You're right on. When a school interprets Title IX as requiring equal treatment between an alleged rapist and his victim, designating the same adults to protect him, removing the victim after a protective order violation, and reshaping school activities around the accused, at what point does compliance language become a weapon that protects the offender and displaces the victim? And who inside the institution should be held responsible for stopping that misuse of policy? In my opinion, Russ, even if the school messed up by not taking Jesse Mack Butler out of school, let's just be honest with that. Because once it became that complicated to protect the victim and future victims, remove the problem. The problem is the threat, not the victim. Remove the threat. Sorry, Jess, you got to go home. You're going to have to do some schooling at home because right now we have to worry about one, LS, but then we also have to worry about the chance that you could do this again and me being in the know. Once they put in that complaint, that put the principal in the know. That means that if Jesse was to do something afterwards, people will go back to the original complaint from LS and said that you failed to act. So me as a principal, I got the highest level of school safety as well as LS. I'm sorry. I'm going to make it easy for myself right now. This kid, talk to the parents. He's going to homeschooling. It's that simple. I mean, it really is that simple. And it's protected by Title IX to protect the victim and again, future victims.
Yeah, and not to get too much into the weeds. While Title IX does all of that, Title II does even more. I mean, it goes above and beyond that, and it specifically showcases and exemplifies what students, that have disabilities are entitled to. And so it just makes it all the more worse. It looks like they're systematically trying to see, how many violations that they can do against a victim. And so I think that, once again, just with what Title IX does enough in this case, but Title II just makes it even worse for the school district, makes it so much better for the victim. And, that's what we're hoping for, is we're hoping to get some justice here. And it appears that the Department of Justice is coming through in a big way on this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. This is a good find by you. It says Title II matters because LS is deaf and hard of hearing. So under ADA Title II, public entities must provide equal access to programs, services, and protections, make reasonable accommodation. Well, but it wouldn't relate to our ADA concern. Hold on. Even though the lawsuit emphasizes Title IX and constitutional claims, Title II ADA issues are embedded in the fact that reporting and communication. LS was a minor, deaf, hard of hearing, dependent on adults to act appropriately once she reported. If the school or SRO failed to communicate clearly, failed to ensure that she understood her rights, failed to account for her trauma plus disability affects reporting, that can implicate Title II. Safety planning accommodation. Once the school knew LS had a disability, she had an IEP. She was dealing with trauma for sexual assault. They had heightened obligation to coordinate accommodations, inform appropriate staff lawfully and carefully, and ensure safety measures didn't isolate or punish her, because she'd also, at this point, in my opinion, because of the IEP, you could also assume that she had limited ability to protect herself, like a normal student could, to some extent, even though they shouldn't be in a position to have to do that. Instead, the complaint alleges staff were kept uninformed. Her specialist didn't know. That's insane. She was removed from activities. She was required to self-manage around her attacker, and that starts to look like denial of meaningful access, which Title II prohibits. And then Title II also applies to police officers, including SROs. If a school resource officer minimized her report, dismissed stalking behavior, failed to intervene, or humiliated her publicly, and did not account for her disability, that can support a Title II theory, especially when combined with equal protection claims. So important nuance. Plaintiffs often plead Title IX plus subsection 1983 first. ADA Title II claims are sometimes added later, used as leverage in settlements, or raised during discoveries when patterns emerge. Even if it's not standalone count right now, the disability fact strengthens every other claim: deliberate indifference, retaliation, equal protection, emotional distress, and negligent supervision. And why this matters strategically: it raises the stakes for the school district, it limits qualified immunity arguments, it strengthens the narrative of systemic failure, and it reframes the case as not just a Title IX failure, but a civil rights failure across multiple fronts. Russ, what made you think of Title II, out of curiosity, so I know for myself?
If you think within the structure of the way the laws are set up across the country, including state law, federal law, and case law, and things like that, and including everything else, what you start to see is, there can be overlapping patterns. So, when I saw that she was deaf, I knew that there would have to be special accommodations for her with regards to her education, but that often is also associated with certain protections, not just from crimes, but from being, left in the lurch without being able to, attend and do as many of the functions as possible within the school, and being ensured that she gets the education that, once again, she's entitled to, per, in this case, Title II. And so that was just kind of like a natural go-to. When you deal with this stuff long enough, you start to see the interconnecting webs of different things, that can, present, certain remedies. The remedies that, we've talked about so far, I think we may have only mentioned some of the monetary stuff. I think I did at one point mention the consent decree, and the consent decree is going to be brutal for these people.
Right. And Russ, I gotta be honest with you, I've been looking at this for a while. I should have thought of the ADA. Because what's funny is I watch these specials, and they briefly mention it, and they also briefly mention it in the reports here, the 20 pages. But yeah, definitely an angle. As they said, it could come out later on. That's a good discussion, because now we covered it now. In case they do present it, we could say, not that I want to file a flag down, but Okay, so now we got the federal lawsuit. 7 defendants, 9 claims, 1 question. So December 22nd, 2025, the complaint that named names. The criminal case had concluded with what the Selvey family felt was inadequate accountability. Butler was free, living in the community under supervision with the possibility of a completely clean record if he simply followed the rules for the next several months when he turns 19. But the criminal case had, and he should turn 19 this next year. But the criminal case had never, what is it? Oh, yeah, it's next year.
I just want to remind people, he's at home. He's not in jail. He's not in prison. Yeah. He's at home.
It's under the Youthful Offender Act. But the criminal case had never addressed a fundamental question. What about the adults and institutions who knew LS had been raped and strangled and chose to do nothing or worse, actively protect her attacker? So remember, this isn't against really Jesse Mack. It's against the systems in play that should have protected her. On December 22nd, 2025, Amber Selvey, Tyler Selvey, and their daughter LS filed a federal civil rights lawsuit that would force that question into open court. Case number 5:25-CV-01544-SLP Court, U.S. District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma, legal representation, Moore Schreier Law Firm, Tulsa, Oklahoma, lead attorney, Pansy Moore Schreier, and then the OBA number is 20289. The lawsuit names 7 defendants: Stillwater Public Schools, that's Independent School District number 16 of Payne County, City of Stillwater, Jesse Butler, Shakay Butler, that's Jesse's mother, Mack Butler, Jesse's father as an individual. They're all as individuals. Walter Howell, principal of Stillwater High School, and as an individual. So this is going way beyond the protection, well, at least for the principal of his position. So there could be a chance the school board could say, hey, you did not follow policy here, and at this point, you're on your own. But then the school board should have also removed him. Paul Blankenship, school resource officer, but also as an individual. That's why it's a civil lawsuit. The lawsuit asserts 9 separate causes of action. First claim, violation of Title IX on behalf of LS against Stillwater Public Schools. Second claim, violation of equal protection under 42 USC subsection 1983 on behalf of LS against Stillwater Public Schools. Third claim, intentional infliction of emotional distress on behalf of LS against Jesse Butler, Mack Butler, Walter Howell, and Paul Blankenship. Fourth claim, respondeat superior employer liability on behalf of LS against school district and city. Fifth claim, negligent hiring, supervision, and retention on behalf of LS against school district and city. Sixth claim, negligence on behalf of LS against Mack and Shakay Butler. Seventh claim, battery on behalf of LS against Jesse Butler. Eighth claim, assault on behalf of LS against Jesse Butler. Ninth claim, negligence on behalf of Amber and Tyler Selvey against all defendants. The lawsuit seeks damages in excess of $75,000 per claim, punitive and exemplary damages, attorney fees and costs, interest accrued and accruing, and any other legal and equitable relief deemed proper and just. But more than money, the lawsuit seeks 3 things that money alone cannot buy: public accountability, systemic reform, and answers. The 2 legal advocates, okay, so they're different roles, same mission. I wanted to mention this real quick. While the federal civil rights lawsuit is being handled by the Moore Schreier Law Firm out of Tulsa, there's another attorney whose name has become synonymous with this case in the public sphere. Her name is Rachel Bussett. I reached out to her. If you guys know her, that'd be great. I'd love to have her on the show. I'm going to show you a quick video, but she's handling the Marcy violations. That's what got a little confusing for me at first. Rachel Bussett is an Oklahoma-based attorney who has been publicly advocating on behalf of the victim's family. And since the criminal... let me go ahead. Russ will be right back. Russell Bussett is an Oklahoma-based attorney who has been publicly advocating on behalf of the victim's family since the criminal case concluded. Her role has been distinct but complementary to the civil litigation, public advocacy, and media commentary. So Bussett has been a vocal critic of how the criminal justice system handled this case, particularly the plea deal that resulted in no prison time for Butler, how victims were treated throughout the criminal process, the lack of meaningful consultation with victims before the plea was accepted, and the broader failures of accountability in cases involving violent juvenile offenders. I'm going to show you a video because she was on News Nation. Bussett has been particularly focused on Oklahoma's Marcy Law, the constitutional amendment guaranteeing victims' rights in criminal proceedings. She has argued publicly that victims in this case were not properly consulted before the DA agreed to a plea deal. I think we saw that with the Kohlberger case as well in Idaho. The process violated the procedural protections Marcy Law was designed to provide, and victims' voices should have been heard and considered before such a consequential decision was made. And then the media presence. Busted has spoken to numerous media outlets, helping to keep public attention on the case and explaining the legal issues at stake. Her willingness to speak publicly has been crucial in educating the community about victims' rights, maintaining pressure for accountability, ensuring the victim's perspective remains centered in public discourse, and challenging the narrative that the criminal case resolution was just or appropriate. And how this is related to the federal lawsuit, while Busted is not listed as counsel of record in the federal civil rights lawsuit, which is being handled by Moore Schreier Law Firm, her public advocacy work has been instrumental in building public awareness of the institutional failures, supporting the family through media attention and community organizing, potentially laying groundwork for the Marcy Law motion scheduled for February 3rd, 2026, and keeping institutional accountability in the public conversation. Now, the Marcy Law connection. The Marcy Law Victims' Rights motion scheduled for hearing on February 3rd, 2026 appears to be directly connected to the concerns Busted has been raising publicly. This motion seeks to enforce victims' constitutional rights and potentially modify Butler's supervision conditions based on procedural violations during the plea process. Busted represents a critical role in modern victim advocacy, the public voice that refuses to let these cases fade from attention once the criminal proceedings conclude. That's the key here, because the criminal proceedings are done, but the victims right now don't feel that there was justice. While civil litigation proceeds through the slow machinery of federal court, advocates like Busted keep the pressure on, ensure the community remains engaged, and remind everyone that legal technicalities don't erase moral failure. In many ways, the Selvey family has two complementary legal strategies working in tandem. The Moore Schreier Law Firm pursuing institutional accountability through federal civil litigation, and Rachel Busted ensuring that the public conversations about victim rights and systemic failures never loses momentum. If this case survives motions to dismiss and proceed to the discovery phase, the plaintiffs will gain access to documents and testimony that have never been public. So this concludes internal communications, emails between administrators discussing how to handle LS's report, text messages about whether to involve police, meeting notes from discussions about the protective order, communications revealing priorities, reputation versus safety. That's what it seemed to be, the reputation of the Butlers versus safety of LS, and discussions about scheduling activities to block student protests. And I wonder if those safety meetings had an agenda and if there was a note keeper. I wonder if those could also be pulled. But again, whoever the chairperson was, you would hold them to the integrity of what was said at that meeting. Sworn deposition. So Principal Howell, so you also get the sworn deposition. So Principal Howell explaining under oath why he chose not to enter the EPO into the database. That's key for me. SRO Blankenship answering questions about why he told LS to get her story straight. Mack Butler being questioned about harassing LS while employed by the district. School officials explaining why teachers were never informed. And policy analysis, whether existing policies were deliberately ignored, whether policies themselves were inadequate, training gaps in Title IX compliance, and patterns of mishandling sexual assault reports. This information would never become public without lawsuits compelling its release. Now, I want to show you, they interviewed her, the lawyer for this case, and I want to show you her interview. It was on News Nation. I think you'll find this interesting. Well, I put a message to see if she can come on my show. If you guys know her or anything, let me know, because I would love to have her on. Here we go.
The Jesse Mack Butler case is one that has angered and baffled people from the very start. And somehow it keeps on delivering, because tonight we've learned that the judge who signed off on that sweetheart deal that spared Butler from prison after raping two classmates has reportedly scheduled her retirement. Judge Susan Worthington is going to be off the bench by the end of the year, and also at the end, and as in the end of this month. And that matters because Worthington is the judge who reclassified Butler from adult offender to a youthful offender. This is a move that wiped out a 78-year prison sentence for raping and strangling two teenage girls when Jesse was 16 and 17 years old. One of the girls was choked so violently that doctors say she was 30 seconds from death. And instead of prison, Butler got probation. If he stays out of trouble, the whole case gets dropped off his record by the time he turns 19, which, by the way, is next August. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions about the timing of Judge Worthington's retirement, I get it. A source close to the case tells us it was previously planned. It's not the result of protests or online scrutiny or the growing legal challenges, but timing, it sure lands. Speaking of legal challenges, by the way, a new legal fight is now looming regarding Jesse Mack Butler. There is a new motion that has been filed alleging that the teen survivors, the victims in this case, their constitutional rights were violated at nearly every stage of this case. And there is a petition in this motion to ask the court to step in and reconsider the deal that erased Jesse Mack Butler's prison time altogether. Rachel Bussett, the attorney behind that motion, who represents one of the teenage survivors, joins me now live. It's good to see you once again. Okay, first, got to get your opinion on Judge Worthington's retirement announcement. Let's start there.
Well, Jesse, I wasn't surprised to see it. Judge Worthington has had some health problems, it's my understanding, for years. So it could all just be convenient timing. I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. Totally fair. I do want to get into the motion, but as I think about this case and I think about the two victims in this case, I have to ask, is it possible there could be additional charges that Jesse Mack Butler might face, either a state or federal level?
Well, certainly there were state charges that weren't brought, but if you listen to that extended video of the arrest of Jesse Butler, the mother asks about getting the phone back, and the detective says, no, that phone won't ever be coming back because of what's found on the phone. So that makes me wonder, Jesse, if there wasn't CSAM materials on the phone, which would make it illegal to give it back. And that's something that could be prosecuted federally as well as at the state level.
I can understand why you make that conclusion. I will say on the other side, we also don't know if there was something on that phone that corroborated the accounts of the victims in this case. And maybe that's what it was about. But I hear you. I hear you. I do want to ask about your motion. So the motion that you make essentially says that these girls' rights were violated. The victims' rights were violated. Their families' rights were violated under Marsy's law. Can you better explain what exactly happened here, why you believe their rights were violated?
Yeah, sure. So Marsy's law is a victims' rights bill that says victims are entitled to certain things along the process, notice being one of them, the opportunity to be heard, to participate, to review the evidence. And these things just weren't given. They weren't given proper procedural notice. They didn't know about the plea agreement until shortly before walking into the courtroom. They've never been able to see all of the materials. We just feel like they were violated from beginning to end.
Could this realistically result in his sentence being thrown out, it being reevaluated? Could this lead to him actually being sentenced to prison?
Well, Jesse, we have to show that there's more than just a Marsy's law violation, that there's other legal basis. We do believe that exists with regard to the youthful certification process, and that will be briefed further.
Have you seen a case in this jurisdiction or another one that would support it, that you've seen something like that before?
There are other jurisdictions where this has happened, but in those jurisdictions, there's law are written a little bit differently about violations of Marsy's law and how it impacts change. Here, no, this is really one of the first of its kind that I know of to challenge a conviction or a plea deal under Marsy's law. I've spoken to many attorneys. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, you were saying?
I've spoken to many attorneys who've said they've tried to assert their Marsy's law rights on behalf of their clients that have been shot down by the district attorneys and the courts. So I don't know that anybody else has filed this before. So it's the first of its kind to my knowledge.
And I understand the prosecution's office is fighting back against this, denies it. Before we wrap things up, I want to go back to your client. How's your client doing right now? You know, as a teenager trying to live a normal life after everything she's been through, and now it's continuing on into this new legal fight. How's she doing?
She's doing as best she can. She won't ever, quote, have a normal teenage life again. Her childhood was stolen from her in many ways. She's lost those typical high school experiences that we all look fondly back on, or maybe not so fondly, depending on, but at least you had the opportunity to have them.
Rachel Bussett, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
All right, we got to start moving forward, Russ. So let me, unless you have anything on that part, Russ, I don't know if you do.
I would just like to say that I know that they're trying to, assert Marsy's law to, first for the civil part of it. For the criminal part of it, I would think that it's almost a foregone conclusion that, that pulling any of this back is probably going to fall under some degree of double jeopardy. However, I do know that there have been some things in the past with regards to defendants not facing actual jeopardy, or that's able to be overcome. If this could be shown that there was, some kind of, criminal conspiracy to lessen the charges against him, it's possible that they could assault that hill, but you almost never see this being done. That's just kind of one of the things, out of the top of my head. I don't expect that they're going to get real justice with regards to the criminal aspect of what he did and the sentence he faced, just because that's the way the justice system is structured. Generally, any pound of flesh that you get from someone, you have to get from the very beginning, or you never have a chance to claw any of that back.
Yeah, and I love that, Russ. Remember, the federal lawsuit, which we're going to go back to now, isn't about anything about resentencing. It's about the civil connection. Less standards, by the way. It's not beyond reasonable doubt. All right, so got a few more sections left. I want to kind of go through these. The power of this lawsuit lies. So now we're going back to the federal complaint. The power of this lawsuit lies in its specificity. Not that word. In how specific it is. It doesn't make vague accusations of institutional failure. It names individuals, site-specific actions and inactions, and explains exactly why each defendant is being held accountable. So against Jesse Butler, the violence that started everything, Jesse Butler is being sued for battery, the sexual assault and strangulation that caused physical harm, and the assault, placing LS in apprehension of immediate harmful contact through stalking and intimidation. The lawsuit alleges he acted with the intent to make harmful contact when he sexually assaulted LS and strangled her, and that he acted with the intent of placing LS in apprehension of harmful contact when he stalked, intimidated, and harassed her on multiple occasions. LS was placed in apprehension of immediate harmful contact as a result of Butler's conduct and suffered fright and terror. These claims seek compensatory, special, and punitive damages. Each claim seeks damages in excess of $75,000. Against Jacques Butler, that's the mother of Jesse Butler. Jacques Butler is sued for negligence based on a single devastating allegation. She heard LS crying while Jesse was assaulting her at their home. She knocked on the door. Jesse told her everything was fine through the closed door. She walked away. The lawsuit alleges Jacques Butler overheard Butler sexually assaulting LS and negligently did not intervene. Mack and Jacques Butler were aware of Butler sexually assaulting LS and could have prevented it. Mack and Jacques Butler's negligence was a direct and proximate cause of LS's injuries, and this is a claim that a mother had knowledge and opportunity to stop a sexual assault occurring in her own home and chose not to. Then you have against Mack Butler, the father who used his position. Mack Butler is sued for negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The allegations against him are extensive. His employment and knowledge. Employed by Stillwater Public Schools as assistant athletic director during all relevant times. Aware of Jesse's demonstrable patterns of disturbing, violent, aggressive behavior, head slamming in baseball clubhouses. Failed to seek help or take corrective action. His action after the EPO, the Emergency Protective Order. When the EPO was served on Jesse at school, Mack was crying and taking it really hard, according to Principal Howell's call to Amber, which is LS's mother. Harassed LS on campus multiple times, including standing outside the chair barn and glaring at her at games. At the January 28, 2025 wrestling match, sat with Principal Howell and SRO Blankenship and glared at and intimidated LS. Was designated as one of Jesse's safe people during Jesse's safety plan meeting. That's crazy. And as Jesse's second safety meeting, February 10, 2025, advocated for Jesse to face no consequences for violating the Emergency Protective Order. Now you have the institutional conflict. The fact that Matt Butler worked for the school district creates an unavoidable conflict of interest. He wasn't just a concerned parent. He was an insider with institutional power, access, and connections. When a school employee's son is accused of rape, and that employee is then allowed to be involved in safety meetings and advocating for his son to face no consequences, the institutional failure becomes personal. Then you have against Walter Howell, the principal who made a choice. Principal Walter Howell is sued for violations of Title IX, equal protection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligence. But negligence is key for me. The allegations against him are perhaps the most damning in the entire complaint because they involve deliberate, conscious choice. And the decision not to log the EPO, that's on January 14, 2025. When questioned by Amber Selvey, Howell admitted he chose not to enter the EPO into the school database because he did not want to interfere with Butler's opportunity to receive an education at the defendant school district. This is deliberate indifference. This is the choice to prioritize an attacker's educational access over a victim's physical safety. And then you have the request to bypass police. That was on September 26, 2024. After the EPO was served, Howell called Amber and asked her to report any problems with Jesse directly to him instead of the Stillwater Police Department. This suggests an intent to keep the matter in-house, potentially interfering with law enforcement and denying LS access to police protection. Hold on one second, Russ. I lost my spot here. Hold on one second. Where am I? Hold on, I got my date rights here. Hold on one second. That's when he was questioned. Okay, copy. The date, I want to make sure it was correct. The compromised safety meeting, January 29, 2025, held LS supposedly confidential safety meeting in his own office, positioned himself to overhear the discussion, let the door open so others in the front office could overhear, and the only protections implemented was move Butler's parking spot, let LS leave one class early. Designation as Butler's safe person. At Butler's safety meeting, Howell was designated as one of Butler's safe people. The principal who refused to log the protective order was trusted to support the rapist. And then the advocating for no consequence. February 10, 2025, at Butler's second safety meeting, after Butler had violated the EPO in full view of staff, Howell advocated for Butler to face no consequences. And then the ongoing harassment, fall of 2025. The lawsuit alleges that Howell continues to attend football games where LS is cheering, and he repeatedly stares at and harasses LS and her family. And critically, Walter Howell is still employed as the principal of Stillwater High School as of December of 2025. And then you have against Paul Blankenship, the officer who chose friendship over duty. School resource officer Paul Blankenship is sued for civil rights violations, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligence. The allegation paints a picture of a law enforcement officer who chose loyalty to the Butler family over protection of a victim. The initial interview, September 12, 2024, when LS reported the assault, Blankenship told her she would have to get her story straight with Butler's other victim and go to the Sayville Center to make sure she was telling the truth. This made LS feel disbelieved and put the burden of proof on her rather than investigating Butler. The humiliating private meeting on January 22nd, 2025, that's what you noted, Russ, pulled LS out of class for private meeting against school policy, told her he was aware Butler was stalking her in the parking lot, informed her that as long as Butler did not speak to her, SRO Blankenship would not do anything about Butler's conduct, which, by the way, stalking is dangerous. Stalking can lead to another sexual assault. You saw that in the Kohlberger case. Deliberately pulled her out of class, then escorted her back to embarrass her. The wrestling match intimidation. Sat with Mack Butler and Principal Howell, and all three glared at and intimidated LS during the match. Failure to attend LS's safety meeting. That was the one on January 29, 2025. Required to attend as part of his duties as SRO, but did not attend. And designation as Butler's safe person. He was made one of Butler's safe persons during Butler's safety plan. And then you got the police supervisor. When Tyler and Amber Selby complained to Blankenship supervisor Lieutenant Cluck, they were told SRO Blankenship is friends with the Butlers, so they should not hold SRO Blankenship conduct against him. This is an admission that Blankenship's friendship with the Butler family compromised his ability to protect LS, and nothing was done about it. And then the advocating for no consequences. At Butler's second safety meeting, Blankenship advocated for Butler to face no consequences for violating the emergency protective order. And then you have against Stillwater Public Schools. That's the institutional deliberate indifference. The school district is sued for Title IX violations and equal protection violations. The Title IX claims alleges deliberate indifference, the legal standard that requires showing the school knew about sexual harassment assault and consciously chose an inadequate response that effectively denied the victim equal access to education. The complaint alleges the school created a hostile educational environment and retaliated against LS by failing to investigate Butler's conduct, failing to stop Butler from harassing and intimidating LS on multiple occasions, failing to notify employees about LS's emergency protective order, failing to enter LS's EPO into the school electronic database, delaying implementation of a safety plan for 4 months after the EPO was served, refusing to enforce LS EPO after Butler stalked and harassed her on campus, allowing Butler to violate LS's EPO in full view of teachers and administrators, allowing its employees to engage in a pattern of harassment and intimidation on school property, interfering with LS's safety plan meeting, taking inadequate actions to protect LS even after implementing the safety plan, discouraging LS from participating in attending school activities so that Butler and his father could continue participating, implementing a safety plan to protect Butler's access to extracurricular activities, banning LS from attending baseball games to protect Butler's access to his sports, implementing policies to prevent students from being served with protective orders on campus, and implementing policies to prevent students from protesting Butler's sentencing. That was another thing. Implementing policies to prevent students from protesting Butler's sentencing. The complaint also notes that Stillwater Public School has recent history of failing to protect students from sexual predators and cites State versus Morjan, Payne County Court Case number CF-20-152 as prior example. The lawsuit alleges defendant school district employees who had actual knowledge of the abuse and harassment had the authority to take corrective action to end the unlawful conduct and did not do so. Instead, defendant school district employees who had the authority to help LS used their authority to shield Butler from consequences and retaliate against LS. The abuse, harassment, and discrimination suffered by LS was so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it deprived her of access to the educational benefits and opportunities provided by the school. And then I got this one. This was the longest section. Against the city of Stillwater, failure to supervise and control. The city is sued for respondeat superior, liability for employee actions, and negligent hiring, supervision, and retention. The city employed SRO Blankenship and had supervisory authority over the Stillwater Police Department, including Lieutenant Cluck, who dismissed the complaints against Blankenship by explaining he was friends with the Butlers. The city is alleged to have failed to properly supervise Blankenship, failed to ensure protective orders were enforced, allowed an officer with conflict of interest, friendship with the Butler family to remain assigned to a case involving the Butlers, and failed to take corrective action when complaints were raised. So, Russ, the question here is this section names parents, administrators, law enforcement, the school district, the city, each accused of different actions and inactions that allowed harm to continue. In civil rights cases like this, why does the law focus on breaking institutional failure down into individuals' decisions? And how does that help courts distinguish between a single bad actor and a system that actively enables harm?
So I think that the important thing to remember here is the scope of this failure. And the fact that they are able to prove that it happened at not just a systemic level, but a level that appears to be, conspiratorial. I don't think that there's anything that I've seen yet that is evidence with regards to proving that. But I think that they're still going to be able to show that. And the fact that they're cataloging it and stuff is just something that is going to put the lawyers, for the school district, the police department, et cetera, as part of, either the county or city governments on edge. And what that's going to do is they're going to say, hey, there is all of this evidence. We don't want this to be seen by a jury. This would be horrible if a jury saw this, because a jury is going to be able to infer things. So we're going to have to, try and get ourselves a settlement. And so, and they're basically just going to have to, if you'll just pardon the expression, bend over and take it, as they should.
And Russ, I'm going to be honest with you. I agree with you. I think that obviously it may be tough to prove people staring you down, all this other stuff, but there's actions that could have been taken that makes that credible to some extent.
Because that person should not have been in a position to stare her down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So there's the context that makes the hearsay a bit credible. Like you don't log in the EPO, you don't remove Jesse Mack from school, you don't remove Blankenship when you just admitted as a supervisor. There's a connection. That's a supervisor admitting it. Now I don't know if that's that's going to be hearsay or whatnot, but if there is reason to believe that they are connected, I think that could be interesting to see. If he wants to deny his connection to the Butler family, then that's going to be a big part of the case, because that matters. I could see them trying to.
When you look at the way that these lawyers, the ones that are going to be, acting on behalf of the county or the police department or the city, they're already painted into a corner. Because what are they going to do? Are they going to call them up there and say, and someone's going to say, no, man, I wasn't meaning to stare him down. I didn't mean to look at him at all. Okay. And so then they're going to go, check that. and then they're going to come right back and say, why was this? And then they're going to put someone else on the stand. Why did you allow this person to be in a position to stare at her at all? There's no place for them to go. There's no safe corner. There's no safe space for them to go, which is good. I want absolute accountability in this. And so that's why I predict this will never, ever go to a jury, because they can't afford more discovery than is already there. What's in discovery right now is horrible. It can only get worse. There's nothing in this that could get any better for the defense in this case.
The fact that the principle's still there blows my mind. But the funny thing is because it's a lesser standard in civil courts, the inaction can prove maybe or push towards the stuff that's hearsay, because there's enough inaction here. There's enough inaction here in a lawsuit alone. I don't even have to say them staring me down. There's enough inaction here that showcases that there wasn't enough to protect the individual. So I love the fact that they're putting this all out there, but they could anchor a lot of stuff in the obvious inactions.
Yeah, and I don't even think they have to go that far. They just have to read what's in Title II or read what's in Title IX and let the law speak for itself. And so that's going to be very damning.
Yeah, because again, the fact that you didn't separate the victim from the aggressor. I mean, these are things that you could prove weren't done. That you didn't log the emergency protective order in, the failure to document from Blankenship, because obviously we know that dialogue occurred. It was reported. All right, we're almost there. This is important. I wanted to cover this. The student protest and the First Amendment violations. This was unique. After Butler was sentenced to youthful offender status in October 2025, students at Stillwater High School were outraged. Many planned protests and walkouts to express their anger at what they saw as a failure of justice. According to the lawsuit, school officials responded by instituting policies to prevent students from protesting Butler's sentencing, scheduling mandatory activities for seniors on the day protests were set to occur, and instituting a policy that penalized students for attending protests during the school day. These actions raise serious First Amendment concerns. Students have constitutional rights to peaceful protest, especially on matters of public concern, like justice and safety. The Supreme Court decision in Tinker v. Des Moines Independent Community School District establishes that student speech is protected unless it substantially disrupts school operations. By scheduling conflicting mandatory events and threatening discipline, school officials allegedly violated students' free speech rights, retaliated against those seeking to hold the school accountable, and sent the message, don't speak up about injustice. The complaint alleges this was part of a broader pattern of the school prioritizing its reputation and protecting Butler over supporting victims and allowing legitimate dissent. So the question I had here for us is, when a lawsuit, hold on. I don't have anything for the, well, what's your thoughts? I don't have any questions for this one. What's your thoughts on then, kind of purposely, it looks like they planned it. I mean, in my mind, Russ, this is all centered on vanity, in my mind.
Yeah, I think that there could be an element of that. What I just see is a system that's too comfortable within itself, that felt like the guidelines and the laws applied to other people, but not them, because they felt that they could skirt those issues and get around them. And so I think that they just thought that, they've done this before, maybe not at the scale, and we don't know the exact circumstances, but I think that, they've been getting away with a lot of things and just kind of, riding roughshod over other people's rights. And so, and while that's just my opinion, and that's just the way that I see it, because usually people that become comfortable with overriding other people's rights and riding roughshod over them, almost always they get to a certain case in a certain set of circumstances that go beyond what they think their sphere of influence is. And that's usually when it circles back and bites them square in the ass.
Right. And guys, the question I had, Russ just pretty much answered. I found it. The question I had, Russ, unless you want to add, I think you answered it. When student protests at schools handling of sexual assault and sentencing outcomes, and administrators respond by scheduling mandatory events, threatening discipline, or discouraging participation. Where is the constitutional line between maintaining school order and unlawfully retaliating against protected student speech? And how should schools respond to dissent without turning accountability into disciplinary issues? I think we kind of touched on that.
Okay, well, actually, we should talk about that one a little bit more because once again, this is, and I haven't seen any real action on this, but I could have missed it because I was like looking at other things. But we come right back to Harmeet Dillon, and she's doing fantastic work at the Department of Justice. This is actually another civil rights action that again could fall squarely within the bounds of a federal lawsuit because of Amendment 1, which is about free speech not being able to be abridged. And so I think that could be yet another indicator here. And all of these things, OCR, Office of Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, and it's like they're pitching her softballs. Here, go ahead, take a swing at this. And she's like, okay. And so we don't know where all of these are going to end up, but certainly that one certainly seems to be something where some federal action, not just warranted, but perhaps inevitable, simply because it was so egregious, and the things that they did to try and keep people from being able to be heard and petition their government for the redress of grievances and all of that stuff that's in the Constitution. Office of Civil Rights, don't mess with them.
And that could probably be easily proven too that they did it, because all you got to do is see the pattern and coincide. I'm sure these events, I'm sure something's documented there. So if they develop a pattern that goes, I'm saying, but that goes a pattern beyond coincidence.
Yeah, you can certainly prove it by a pattern, but the way they've been running their mouth with regards to, the sexual assault of a student, and they're still, saying stupid jackass things. I mean, there's nothing then that they're not going to think of. What the hell? We're gonna shut this protest down now.
Well, you're 100%
civil rights, no joke. Harmeet Dillon, look her up.
But you're 100% correct, Russ, because at the end of the day, they're creating the context where hearsay is now, I'm going to believe it, because there's enough in the context to make me say, hey, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't doubt that this wasn't done. Yeah. It's hard to prove intent, but the context itself will lead you to it. The damages, what LS lost and continues to lose. So the lawsuit seeks damages in excess of $75,000 per claim. These are quick last couple of sections, guys. We're wrapping up. But the complaint details what those damages actually represent in LS's life. So physical injuries, surgery required to repair damage to her throat from strangulation. That was July 3rd, 2025. Ongoing medical treatment for injuries, physical pain and suffering, past and future. Mental and emotional harm, severe mental and emotional anguish, trauma from both the assault and institutional betrayal, ongoing counseling and mental health treatment, fear, terror, and continuing anxiety. Educational impact, ability to receive an education was and continues to be impaired, unable to fully participate in extracurricular activities, missed time from a job as a cheer and tumbling coach, loss of educational opportunities, and impairment of earning capacity. Loss of normal life, loss of ability to participate in school activities, loss of enjoyment of life, loss of reputation, and unable to fully participate in family life or perform usual chores. And then the harassment, experienced harassment from Jesse Butler, Mack Butler, Walter Howard, and SRO Blankenship. Continues to experience ongoing harassment from Walter Howard, who still attends games where she cheers. And the parental damages. Tyler and Amber Selby also seek compensatory damages for medical expenses for LS's treatment, loss of LS services, having to perform additional household work to compensate, and being deprived of the comfort, enjoyment, and society of their child. Beyond money, the lawsuit seeks punitive and exemplary damages designed to punish the defendant and deter similar conduct in the future. So, Russ, when a lawsuit lists damage like medical care, lost education, emotional trauma, loss of normal life, and harm to a family, how do courts even begin to assign a dollar value to something that can't truly be restored? And in cases involving institutional betrayal, are damages meant to compensate the victim, punish the wrongdoing, or deter future misconduct, or all three?
Okay, so it's all of the above. And in the federal system, all of these things will be eked out to within a certainty. Like, for instance, the one that kind of seems a little bit, amorphous, if you will. And I mean, I hate to say that about it, but the loss with regards to her educational opportunity, yeah, difficult to put a price tag on it. But you know what? The federal government can and will do that. It's probably going to be listed somewhere at around $250,000 to $300,000. Was where I ballparked it at. The ones that are really going to be hard with respect to the entities involved, like the police department, the county, the city, whatever is there, are going to be the punitive damages. And you're going to see punitive damages, I believe, upwards of $4 million. But wait, there's more. The list just keeps going. And so, for the emotional damage, it'll be something else. For the physical pain and suffering, it will be for another thing. Let's see. Like, if I just looked at just the list and not talking about the actual thing, medical and psychological, educational damage, future economic impact, compensatory damages, which are non-economic, emotional distress, loss of educational opportunities, even more, just piling on, civil rights violations. Those ones, are going to come to probably close to the 1 million mark just by themselves. The punitive damages, reckless disregard for victim rights, deliberate indifference, malicious conduct, cover up and obstruction, calculation factors. This is what makes it less or more, like mitigating or aggravating circumstances. Reprehensibility falls on the extreme side because she was nearly killed and raped and all of that. Ratio to compensatory, typically 4 to 1. So the wealth of the defendants, the district has deep pockets. And we're only talking here about the entities. We're not even talking about the individuals yet. The individuals are going to get socked too. Hal is probably going to, lose it to the tune of 100 to 300K. Blankenship's going to be in debt for up to 400K. Mack Butler himself, probably 500K. And so the list just goes on and on and on. And that's why I say they would be stupid to fight this and put it in front of a jury. The jury is not going to like any of these people involved, and they're going to be very sympathetic to the victim. And when they hear about the other victim and some of the other lack of consequences here, they don't want this in front of a jury. That now they've acted stupidly up to this point, so they could go there. But I can't see counsel, which is going to be their attorneys, saying, "Hey, yeah, man, we got to take this to the box. We got to fight this all the way." No, that would be really, really bad advice.
Yeah, and Russ, I know they're attacking, obviously, the institution is deeper pocket, but the institution is where I think the greatest failure is. So we're going to make an example out of this.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Truthfully, in this case, yes, absolutely. The primary victimizer from the viewpoint of this lawsuit is the entities themselves, are the institutions.
Right. So I got last two sections. People have asked, can this lawsuit send Butler to prison? No, absolutely not. The federal civil lawsuit cannot change, modify, or affect Butler's criminal sentence in any way. Butler isn't even the primary defendant in the civil case. The Title IX and civil rights claims target the school and city. The only way Butler goes to prison is if he violates the conditions of his youthful offender supervision, which would trigger revocation proceedings and imposition the suspended adult prison sentence, which I think is 10 years. Why sue the school and city instead of just Butler? Practical reason: Butler is 18 years old with no independent wealth or asset. A judgment against him personally would be largely uncollectible. The school district and city have substantial resources and liability shorts. As Russell mentioned.
I just want to say this: the school and the county and the police department are the perpetrators.
Yeah,
they are the perpetrators. They are the ones that are supposed to get sued in this thing because they are the ones that failed and made things worse. I mean, at this point, this Jesse Mack Butler, all he is he's the one that initiated everything going forward and did make her a victim. But they've double, triple, and quadruple victimized her at this point. They're every bit the perpetrator that he was and is.
Yeah, and guys, we talked about that. I even do this in my show. You're in a position once you're made aware. I've done this in my profession. I mean, once you're made aware, you can't be unaware. That's the thing. And it looks like she did the right thing. She made people aware, and they try to hide it as opposed to go ahead and do what's correct. That's what my opinion would be. So now, not only do you have negligence, but you have obstruction of justice. You have a lot of things that come into play. But at a certain level, like being the city at the highest of levels, you were brought into awareness. Now the question is, and this is the integrity of the system at play, what do you do when someone gives you this level of awareness? So then you have the legal and moral reasons. This lawsuit addresses a completely different wrong than the criminal case. It's not about the sexual assault themselves, which were addressed in criminal court. It's about the institutional failures that compounded LS's trauma. The family believes and is alleging that adults and institutions who knew about the danger failed to protect their daughter. That failure is a separate harm requiring separate accountability. Only institutions can be forced to change policies and procedures. Public entities need consequences to drive systemic reform. As LS mother said, watching her stay brave while adults failed her has been both inspiring and heartbreaking. The criminal case dealt with the perpetrator. The civil case deals with the system that enabled continued harm. They asked, will Butler have to register as a sex offender under the current youthful offender status? That's no. If Butler successfully completes his program, he'll not be required to register and his record will be expunged. This could only change if his status is revoked and he's transferred to an adult status, at which point registration would be mandatory. This is one of the most frustrating aspects for victims and the community. Someone who pleaded no contest to first-degree rape could avoid the sex offender registry entirely. And then could Butler's plea deal still be overturned? Extremely unlikely, so essentially no. But once a plea deal is accepted by the court and sentence is imposed, it becomes a final judgment. There's no standard mechanism for victims or the public to appeal or overturn it. The only potential avenues would be Butler violating its conditions, which would trigger the revocation, successful Marcy law motion, which we're seeing now. I showed you the video on that. From Rachel, from what's the lawyer's name again? Rachel Bussett. Successful Marcy law motion, which might modify conditions but won't void the plea, and discovery of prosecutorial misconduct or fraud, which would require extraordinary evidence not currently alleged. That means that they're going to attack the prosecution side, saying that they didn't do enough, which part of it is not being consulted in the plea. Public outrage alone, no matter how justified, does not give courts power to undo lawfully entered judgments. And did Butler get preferential treatment because of his family? This is the question burning in the Stillwater community. The facts: Butler's father was assistant athletic director for Stillwater Public Schools. Stillwater is a college town where OSU athletics hold enormous influence. The case moved unusually quickly, charged to plea in 5 months. That's how quick it took. The same defense attorney represented Butler and another defendant in a similar local case. And the suspicions: many community members believe family connections influenced the outcome. Some point to a pattern of leniency from the DA's office in certain cases. The speed and outcome seem inconsistent with the severity of the charges, and legal analyst James Worth acknowledged, given the severity of this allegation, I can certainly understand that concern. And what we can prove: nothing concrete. There is no documentary evidence of corrupt influence in the public record. The DA had legal discretion to agree to youthful offender status. The judge had authority to accept it. The decision went through legally proper procedural steps. What we cannot prove is whether informal influence, relationships, or pressure played a role, whether a defendant without those connections would have received the same outcome, whether prosecutors pursued the case as aggressively as they could have. While many suspects preferential treatment, while many suspect preferential treatment, proving it would require evidence that doesn't appear to exist in the public record. It remains a matter of perception, community belief, and circumstantial observation. The civil lawsuit doesn't directly address this question. It focuses on what the school and city did after LS reported the assault. But the backdrop of suspected favoritism certainly fuels the anger driving the demand for institutional accountability. These are the last two questions, Russ. Here's the second to last one. Let me give it to you now. Right here. Hold on. Let me see. How people distinguish between what feels unjust? Let me just make sure this is the right one. Is this not? Yeah, it's not. It's the right one. All right. When the public sees a serious criminal case result in a lawful but deeply unpopular outcome, How should people distinguish between what feels unjust and what the legal system is actually empowered to change? And why is it important, especially in high emotion cases, to separate proven facts, legal constraints, and unresolved suspicion rather than collapsing them into a single narrative of wrongdoing? Got that, Russ?
Can you say that again? The last part cut out.
Yeah, sorry. All right. So I got, when the public sees a serious criminal case result in a lawful but deeply unpopular outcome, how should people distinguish between what feels unjust and what the legal system is actually empowered to change? And why is it important, especially in high emotion cases, to separate proven facts, legal constraints, and unresolved suspicion rather than collapsing them into a single narrative of wrongdoing?
Yeah, I think that first of all, if we harken back to the procedure where they gave him youthful offender status and all that, I believe that did violate Marcy's law. I know that there are people out there that saying, well, the judge could accept that, and the DA, had the power to do that. Yeah, only if they violated Marcy's law. So I think that's the bad part of this. If I were to distill this down to one thing, and I know that we've talked a lot about the victims here. I know that we've talked a lot about this federal case and the Civil Rights Act and the Office of Civil Rights and all of that. But if I just hearken back a minute to the criminal component of this, in my opinion, if I were to distill this down to one thing that I believe this individual has learned, the person who's the original perpetrator, I would say that probably the lesson that he has learned is not to leave his victims alive. And I'll just end with that.
Wow. Powerful, but you cannot deny the truth of that. That was powerful, Russ. I got this one leads to the last question, Russ, before we get to a close. And thank you so much for your time. I know it's a long one, but this was not an easy show to put together, guys. So, guys, if you like the content, don't forget we have donate or buy me a cup of coffee. There's a link to that in the description. You got mine and Russ's name in the description. You just got to go down, and then you have the for mine a link on top of the YouTube channel. So this is the last section before we close. It's the bottom line: 3 different paths to 3 different kinds of accountability. So the criminal justice system gave Jesse Mack Butler a second chance at redemption through rehabilitation rather than incarceration. Reasonable people can disagree about whether that was appropriate given the severity and violence of his crimes, but that decision has been made, and absent violations, it stands. This federal lawsuit asks a different question entirely. What about the adults who failed to protect the child after they knew she was in danger? LS, a 16-year-old girl who is deaf and hard of hearing, reported being raped and strangled. She told school officials a court issued a protective order, and then she sat in math class with a rapist for 2 weeks. The protective order was never logged into the school security system. Teachers weren't told there was a victim and predator in their classroom. When her mother sought help, she was allegedly directed away from police. When students protested, they were threatened and obstructed. And when Butler violated the protective order in front of staff, no one intervened. This isn't about retrying Butler's guilt. His no contest plea establishes what he did. This is about what happened after LS reported the assault and whether institutions face real consequences when they fail the students they're supposed to protect. Over the next year, 3 legal proceedings will unfold. Personal accountability, so that's Butler's supervision. Butler's compliance will be monitored through periodic hearings with the prison sentence hanging over him for any serious violations. This is accountability for the perpetrator. Then you have procedural accountability. That's the Marcy law motion. Victims will fight for their procedural rights, seeking recognition that their voices should have mattered in the plea process. This is accountability for the justice system process. Attorney Rachel Bussett has been instrumental in keeping this issue in the public eye and ensuring victims' rights remain a central concern. And then you have the institutional accountability. That's the federal civil lawsuit. A federal court will examine whether Stillwater Public Schools, the city of Stillwater, and specific individuals violated LS's civil rights and whether they should face consequences. And this is accountability for the system's failures. None of these proceedings will undo the trauma LS and other victims experience. None will erase the assaults from memory. None will fully satisfy everyone's sense of justice. But together they represent different pathways towards accountability and towards answering the question at the heart of this case. When a teenage girl reports rape and the adults around her do nothing, or worse, actively prevent protection, what are the consequences? Is it enough to say mistakes were made and move on? Or do institutions like individuals face real penalties when they prioritize reputation over safety? convenience over protection, and silence over justice. The federal lawsuits filed on behalf of LS seek to answer that question, and the answer could determine whether schools across Oklahoma and beyond finally understand that failures to protect students come with a price. Now, Russ, when the public sees a serious criminal case result in a lawful but deeply unpopular outcome, how should people distinguish between hold on.
We did that.
Yeah, did that one. It's this one. When a child reports rape and every system designed to protect her instead protects itself, the criminal system prioritizing rehabilitation, the school system prioritizing reputation, and authorities minimizing risk, what does real accountability actually look like? And if institutions can acknowledge failure without facing meaningful consequences, how do we prevent mistakes were made from becoming the end of the story instead of the beginning of the reform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we've chopped it up really good here. I think that, that question, I think is just self-evident that the system does not seem to want to act in the best interest of the victim. The system does not seem to be self-correcting. And so when the system is not self-correcting, I'm thankful for people like Harmeet Dillon, who appear to be taking this kind of stuff very, very seriously. And it looks like, I don't know that this system can be reformed, but it's either going to be reformed or it's going to wish to God that it had been. So,
that makes sense. I want to add something too, stuff that I see in corrections, the universal change policies. When something goes wrong, sometimes the system is working, it just gets bastardized by people that used to manipulate it as a way to protect themselves. So, I mean, obviously, looking in this system, there were things in play that would have protected her. It wasn't put forward by the people that were in those positions to make things happen. So, I mean, granted, we do have to have some more accountability in that system. That seems to be where the biggest concern would be, is if you fail to do what's expected of you to protect the victims, to protect future victims, then this is the level of accountability you're going to be held to. And I do believe when it comes to corrections, rehabilitation versus you got to have accountability, and that comes into the safety and security aspect of dangerous individuals, because there are people that you can hope to change them, but they won't. And to leave them outside in the free world to run rampant will only cause future victims. And now you were in a position to know, and you could have saved lives. Because I think, like Russ said, this is a progressive, aggressive predator. I mean, he's only going to get better. And to not just at least put an immediate stop on him. And I'm not even cared about rehabilitation at this time. You're a threat. Rehabilitation at that point is secondary. And I think sometimes we have to see that. Don't get me wrong. I get it's a joint function, rehabilitation, safety and security, rehabilitation, but priority will always be safety and security. And that's where rehabilitation has to get filtered through, not the other way around. Safety and security does not get filtered through rehabilitation. It gets filtered through safety and security. First, that person's a threat, safety and security, and then rehabilitation can be filtered from that perspective. But I think this is great because it holds institutions accountable, but more importantly, the people that represent those institutions. Because once you're put into that higher level of trust, and I've been in positions like this for 11 years, the highest level of trust that can be given to someone. Once you are given that trust, any failure at that level should be held at the most extreme. And I'm sorry, but I agree. And I think that comes with the responsibility of taking the position. Because then if people understood that, maybe the people that shouldn't be going out for these positions wouldn't. But it's not just I'm going to be a principal to get the perks of being a principal. No, it comes with more responsibility and the accountability of that responsibility. So final question. Or not final question, the epilogue. As this case moves forward, several questions remain unanswered. Will discovery reveal evidence of deliberate cover-up or just systemic incompetence? And does the distinction matter to the victims? I think it's cover-up, to be honest with you. But can financial penalties actually change institutional behavior, or will they just become line items in insurance claims? And what specific enforceable policy changes could prevent this type of failure from happening again? How do you ensure equal injustice How do you ensure equal justice in small communities where certain families hold institutional power? And we discussed a lot of this. If a 16-year-old with a disability reports being raped and strangled, and every adult with power to protect her chooses not to, what does accountability look like? And ultimately, what would it take for the victims, the community, and even Butler himself to move forward with this? These are the questions a federal jury may have to answer. These are the questions Stillwater, Oklahoma must grapple with. And these are the questions every school district in America should be asking themselves right now, because LS's story isn't unique. It's just unusually well documented. And that should terrify us all. Hey, Russ, this was a great dialogue. I know you're busy today, so I appreciate this dialogue. So the dialogues on true crime are taking a bit longer because there's a lot to discuss. So it does become a bit time consuming, but it's worth it because I think in the end, with the support of the community, these dialogues bring about awareness, and then awareness brings about change. That's the key. That's why we do it. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, just thanks for having me on here. I think that we covered this probably about as in depth as anyone. Certainly deeper than any of the predominant media cultist types out there. ABC, CNN, CBS, all of that stuff. So I think people pay attention, know what's going on in your community, and understand that you should know when your community is failing, and you should know when your community is doing well. And you know what? Keep coming back here, because I think that this is where you get the education.
I love that, Russ. And that's because of what we do. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. Don't forget, I do have the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee links in the descriptions. And as always, guys, stay safe. See you for the next time we decide to cover something, hopefully that I believe is meaningful and valuable. That's the key. It's not just about covering the crime itself, but where can we create the biggest impact? As always, guys, stay safe.